All right, we will go ahead and get started, everyone. Good morning, and welcome to OETC and Microsoft's M365 webinar series. I'm James Kelly, OETC's marketing coordinator. Today's session will cover new innovations that work together and across platforms to safeguard your entire organization. We'll be looking at Azure AD, Microsoft DLP, Microsoft Defender, as well as some best practices and how to best get started. The session will be presented by Sam Buckhalter, Microsoft Education's Senior Security, Compliance, and Identity Specialist. The session is also being recorded and will be sent out next week. There'll be time for Q&A, so feel free to ask your questions throughout the webinar. On the next slide, I'll take a quick moment to highlight OETC's renewal team, some of whom are on today's webinar. If you have any licensing questions, you can reach out to help@oetc.org, and someone from the team will be happy to assist you. And with that, I'll hand it over to you, Sam.
Thank you, James. Appreciate you having me here today. Hey, everyone. My name is Sam Buckhalter. I am with the U.S. education team here at Microsoft. I've been with Microsoft just about 11 years and on the education team for 4 of those. So quick contact information if you need to reach out to me on LinkedIn or email. It's right here for you. But we have an action-packed schedule today. Couple agenda items to address beforehand. We're going to talk a little bit about the threat landscape, what things look like today, the challenges you're all facing. We're going to talk a little bit about common misconceptions about the security platform. We'll do a little bit in different Microsoft 365 licensing, A3 versus A5. I don't want to get too into licensing or any type of sales stuff, but want to make sure everyone's aware of what you might have already, what security and compliance features you might have, and then what else is out there. We'll go through a handful of quick wins, things that you can deploy rapidly and get a good bang for your buck in your environment. Also want to do a demo of a lot of our features, go through some of the admin panes, walk you through some of the policy configuration, and again, things that you can do for a quick bang for your buck to help out your security and protection platform. Also have Q&A. We'll have some time at the very end. However, I don't mind being interrupted. So if you have questions as we're going along, please use the chat window. We've got Melanie and James on the line here that are going to help me facilitate questions. So as things pop up, please bring up your questions and we can try to address them as we go along. But we'll also have some time at the very end that you can hop off of mute and ask directly. So kicking off, let's talk about what is the landscape? What do things look like overall? And common theme the last couple of years is COVID. Cyber criminals, they follow the trends, the issues of the day, the headlines. That's the theme, is it's ever changing. COVID's been a common one. We're getting a lot of nation state actors with SolarWinds attacks and Nobelium and other types of attacks, but it's ever evolving, ever changing, and you see little spikes in trends and techniques based on kind of the flavor of the day and what's going on in the world. Malware by industry. This is a surprising slide, but education is immensely targeted by malware. When you compare it to other industries, it's amazing the quantity. We're looking at over 80% of malware attacks are actually hitting the education industry. These stats are actually very recent. This is last 30 days. So we're seeing over 7 million encounters of malware in the education space in the last 30 days. Here's a handful of threats, but it's showing where attackers are targeting and where it's important to spend your time. Phishing campaigns, that's another common attack vector into education. We're seeing trillions of messages scanned, 13 or so billion malicious emails blocked, another 1.6 billion with phishing URLs that have been identified or blocked, and different payloads that we're privy to that we're helping prevent from various types of phishing types of attacks. You can see those trends from an identity compromise perspective. These trends are continuously increasing from a phishing perspective. So we've got our password spray attacks and other breach attacks that are decreasing or staying relatively the same, but phishing is one of the most common targeted attacks in the industry. Beyond that, a less talked about component, in addition to phishing, is phishing with the intent to request OAuth permissions. That is on the rise. That is increasing. So if you're not familiar with that, you get that phishing email, you get a link, it's connecting you to an application that's then looking for you to grant permission to your data, your account, your environment for that application to have access to. So that's another thing that is popping up and becoming a larger threat. Ransomware, that's nothing new. We've been talking ransomware for many years, but it does continue to be one of the top reasons why a Microsoft DART team, the detection and response team, might have to go out and assist the customer, is for ransomware. And it's not just the old school ransomware that kind of proliferates itself. These are targeted, human-driven, human-operated ransomware attacks that are specifically selecting and identifying high-value targets, high-value infrastructure to get the biggest payout that they can. And so that continues to be a common threat. Identity access management. Don't want to have all doom and gloom. Identity access management is definitely always an area of concern. But as we look at some of the old protocols, we'll talk about basic auth and legacy auth here in a little bit. But as we look at some of the old protocols, they're still the ones of target. IMAP is a huge protocol targeted by attackers because it leverages legacy or basic authentication. But with the deprecation of our basic authentication protocols over time, Microsoft is deprecating that later in October of this year. But a lot of our customers have gone ahead and disabled these protocols early on. And because of that, we are seeing a dramatic reduction in attacks using legacy methods. With that, we're seeing upticks in strong authentication, people using MFA or other combinations of verifying who you are, whether it's a managed device or a combination of other components to give you a stronger authentication. MFA can be quite a challenging endeavor in education, but it is growing overall, and more people are able to adopt that. So here's where Microsoft comes in. We have a unique position where we see a ton of signals, trillions of signals across multiple products, multiple landscapes. We're seeing 630 billion authentication events. We actually get more authentication events in a day than many of our competitors see in a year. But we have billions of emails that are analyzed, URLs that are scanned, where we can see the reputation and help block and protect your users. So here's some of our common misconceptions. First one is that we're just a small school. Attackers won't see us. They're not concerned with us. And that kind of falls in with security through obscurity. It's not the case. The attackers, they're targeting everyone. And as you've seen from our earlier slides, education is one of the top attack targets. Another misconception is we're safe, we're behind our firewalls, all is good. That's not enough. I mean, it's part of the picture, but it's not enough, especially with the remote, the hybrid workforce, hybrid learning, opening up different ports. It's a component, but it's definitely not the answer. MFA might be too difficult to roll out, or in education, it is very difficult. And so a lot of times you'll defer back to password reset policies. And what it comes down to is MFA is one of the biggest capabilities to reduce your exposure level. There's a lot of avenues through YubiKeys, through OAuth tokens, different phones. It doesn't always require a smartphone, but being able to implement other controls to help you with that rollout and leverage MFA is a huge win. Couple others, attackers won't find what's vulnerable, whether it's missing patches or unsecured VPNs. They're going to find that stuff. Patching remains one of the biggest defenses for new and emerging threats. And then lastly is our security operations team. They're able to manage everything on their own. They can do it manually. They've got good insight. They know what's going on in the environment. And the reality is we're all dealing with so many different security products. Automation is key, and being able to respond in an automated fashion is going to help your security operations team scale, because we're all overloaded and many of us wearing multiple hats. So challenges involving in any environment. The threat landscape changes daily. There's always a new threat. There's always a new trend, and it's how you keep up with that is what your security posture is going to look like going forward. Being able to correlate those signals. It's time consuming and expensive. If you're relying on a SIEM to do that correlation, you're definitely more reactive. It's after the fact, versus being proactive and making those correlations within minutes versus hours or days. We all have many security products, many different silos, and being able to correlate threats from email to an endpoint to an identity threat, bringing that all together in one pane of glass is a huge benefit. And that kind of goes into our disparate solutions causing inefficiency. If you live in silos, you're only looking in a silo. And so there's a lot of inefficiencies built in with that inherently. So with that, real quick, let's talk Microsoft. Many of you might be on A3 licensing. Some of you others might be on A5. These web links are a great resource, aka.ms edu on a page, or /edu on a page. That's going to give you a quick view of our licensing. It's in a big graphical representation. It's probably the easiest to make sense. We all know Microsoft licensing can be kind of confusing at times. Our account teams are always here to help you navigate that as possible. There's another link here at the bottom, aka.ms /edu sub on a page. Those are your student use benefits. What benefits and licenses do your students get included with the other licenses that you may have purchased? So as a quick review, our A3 licensing has a ton of really great security features and foundational elements for you to deploy. Azure Active Directory is amazing. You're getting conditional access, you're getting multi-factor authentication, single sign-on into Microsoft apps, but also third-party apps. You can do self-service password resets. With A3, you're also getting the information protection components, being able to label, encrypt, protect content, whether it's an email or a file. You have that capability. In the Windows, and actually I shouldn't say Windows, the endpoint perspective, you get a great security platform, foundational security platform. So one of the recent additions to A3 licenses was what is known as Microsoft Defender for Endpoints Plan 1. So you get a Defender for Endpoints solution, Plan 1, with your A3 licenses, and that's covering the traditional Microsoft antivirus, anti-malware components. It's giving you the attack surface reduction capability to help harden your workstations proactively. And that's the great thing about this new introduction into A3 is it's not just Windows anymore. That holds true with Mac, iOS, and Android. So that capability spans all of those devices. Very valuable. But the key here is with A3, you really do have a great foundation. You can start your security and compliance journey with these licenses. To build upon that, just to kind of highlight a few of the features beyond A3, with our A5 licensing, you're starting to look into more automation, the advanced heuristics, being able to detect threats cross-domain, doing automatic remediation. So when something comes in from email, but then ends up compromising a workstation, you correlate those. You're getting that EDR, XDR type capability. In addition to that, you're also starting to look at being able to do some pretty fancy things with data protection and identifying like trainable classifiers and content types. You can integrate with your DLP solution with your endpoints, and that's Windows and Mac. You can integrate your data loss prevention with your Teams chat and channel messages. You're getting that advanced phishing and link URL rewrite, all of those great components with the A5 suite. So again, I'm going to try to call out today as we talk about different solutions, what falls within A3, A5, and kind of where those protections lie. But if there's any questions, these are great resources. And again, you can reach out to the account teams for clarification and any deep dives. So with that, why Microsoft? Why are we here talking? And really, our unique advantage is that built-in cross-platform experience, being able to use that artificial intelligence and machine learning capability to help secure your platforms across a broad scope of people, data, devices, and apps, having all of that under one pane of glass. So we break this down into 4 pillars. Our identity and access management, protecting your users and your devices. We have our threat protection pillar, stopping attacks, automating the remediation of those attacks, and preventing them from ever occurring to begin with. We have our information protection component, is protecting that data, protecting both external risks as well as insider risks. And then our cloud security, safeguarding not just the Microsoft cloud, but all cloud environments. We're all living in multi-cloud environments, whether you might just be mixing Google Drive with Microsoft OneDrive, or you're using AWS alongside of Azure. That's enabling and protecting multi-cloud resources. So let's dive in a little bit with our information protection components. What is Microsoft Information Protection? It is effectively a marketing term. It's the whole strategy of information protection in the Microsoft suite. So you're probably seeing a lot of terms like data loss prevention or Azure Information Protection. Both of those comprise of what Microsoft Information Protection is. So I like to think a quick reminder of data loss prevention. That's protecting your data in transit, whether you're sending an email, or maybe you're sharing something, or you're copying a file somewhere. It's that movement action that generally triggers a data loss prevention policy that then results in encryption or blocking or whatever you've implemented for that scenario. Azure Information Protection, that can be more aligned with protecting your data at rest or during creation. AIP it goes with the file. It's associated with the file. So it doesn't matter if you have a protected file that's encrypted, restricted access, maybe it expires. That file can be moved to a USB key, dropped in a parking lot, or maybe accidentally uploaded to a public file share. That protection goes with the file no matter where that file is, so that to access it, you have to have be able to authenticate, and you have to have permissions to access that content. So as we're looking at data protection, it's best practice to think across all of your environments. And of course, normal thinking, you're looking at mailboxes with Exchange, your SharePoint and OneDrive repositories, or Teams and Office groups, or your Office platform, whether it's on Windows or iOS, Mac, etc. But it also extends to things like on-premises. You've got your legacy file shares, or maybe you have a SharePoint library on-prem. All of this is important for identifying where your data is and how you protect it. This also expands to third-party apps, your other SaaS apps you might use. We've talked about Google Workplace, or maybe Box, or Workday, Salesforce, Dropbox, etc. All of those are locations that you want to think big, think across all those environments. But honestly, that's not enough. That's great. A lot of that is the very Microsoft world, and we kind of tackled these three components here on the left. But your information protection and governance security spans way beyond that. It's looking in your Microsoft cloud locations, expanding those capabilities into your Azure storage or other SQL databases that might be in Azure. Extending that into third parties, having that same protection and governance platform that you're using for your collaboration workloads, having that extend into AWS and GCP, or it could be that SharePoint library on-prem, or that SQL server on-prem, or even third-party on-prem, whether it's Teradata or kind of, as I mentioned earlier, those file shares. So key here, think big. Your data is everywhere, and having that information of what data is out there and how to protect it is key to a good data security posture. As we pivot a little bit into our security components, most of these are A5, but just wanted to give you that brief introduction into the Defender category. We've moved away from the ATP, or Advanced Threat Protection naming structure that you might have been familiar with a couple years ago. So this is kind of your cheat sheet on what the new names are for all the products. But real quick, Defender for Identity, that is a on-premises agent, goes on your domain controllers. It brings in detections from on-prem identity threats into the rest of the Defender stack, whether it's lateral movement detection, credential harvesting, pass the hash attacks, other anomalies, but that is what Defender for Identity is. Defender for Endpoint, that's your endpoint protection and endpoint detection and response capability. So it's the proactive, threat and vulnerability management capabilities, knowing what's on the devices, knowing what's unpatched, having proactive responses to addressing those. It's the hardening of the device, it's the antivirus, but it's also the post-breach detection and response capability and automatic remediation components there as well. Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps, that was previously known as Cloud App Security. That is the Microsoft CASB product. CASB is just industry term for Cloud Access Security Broker, but that is the Microsoft solution there. So protecting your cloud apps, giving you different session controls, looking for anomalous behavior and being able to execute policies and detections based on that. And then lastly is Microsoft Defender for Office 365. That, I hesitate to say this, but it's your advanced email protection platform, but it goes beyond email. That's why I hesitate to say that. You're protecting email, both internal email as well as external email. It's doing URL rewrites. It's doing zero-day scanning for attachments. It's helping you with your phishing campaigns. Again, this is internal and external protection. It stems beyond that. So it's also protecting your OneDrive and SharePoint and team shares. It's integrating to your Office app. So as you're building out a PowerPoint like I have today, and you integrate links, safe links is being used to protect those links inside your PowerPoint. So the reach is way beyond just email into the entire collaboration suite there. So the key here with this naming change under Defender, it's the shift away from silos. It's the cross collaboration. It's this whole solution as a suite of products working together. And that's the key, is they're automating responses, working truly together to give you a seamless integrated experience. One portal, automatic healing, unified experience, being able to hunt threats cross-domain, cross-device, cross-territory, all in one pane of glass. Real quick, this is just to give you a good example of all the security categories for the Microsoft solution all up, from conditional access and single sign-on for identity and various device management capabilities with what used to be known as Intune device. Now we have Device Manager, protecting your data with AIP and DLP and encryption, to the threat protection response for your email, your data, your cloud data, your endpoints, etc. So it's just showing that full end-to-end protective capabilities. So common attack threat. This is nothing new. So walking through how a lot of these threats proliferate through an environment. Most of it starts from an email or an attachment someone received, where someone clicked on that link, whether it's in an attachment, in an email, and their identity has been compromised. That user, that attacker may exploit that machine. They could go reach out to other networks, pull other resources in, basically creating a command and control central on that device to then look and move lateral to find other identities, to escalate those permissions as best as possible, get other resources, get access to your data, or drop a payload, drop that ransomware in your environment that maybe now encrypts your domain controller or something along those lines. But each of the security products protects a different phase of this, but then they all talk together to give you that comprehensive view. So So we're looking at a couple common attack scenarios. First one might just be compromised user, whether it was a brute force attack or a phishing campaign, but you start identifying risky traits about the logins, the sign-in sessions, and Microsoft 365 is detecting that. And what happens is Azure AD, you can use these detections to automatically do things like disable the account, and at least until you're back into good standing. So it would disable the account both in Azure AD as well as on-prem Active Directory, stopping that threat, stopping that avenue, and then further triggering if you need to do password reset, prove who that user is to get them in good standing. Phishing attack vectors. So very common phishing email comes in. This is Defender for Office 365. It might detect that threat through that URL scanning or through zero-day attachment filtering. It would identify that threat, block it coming in, but then it's also going to go look at where is this threat come in before and where maybe was it coming in benign but weaponized after the fact, what mailboxes was it delivered to previously. It's going to go back and make sure that those are remediated. It'll kick off that automatic investigation. But then again, it also will go look at your OneDrive and SharePoint and Teams repositories. Maybe you copied that content into a cloud storage location and remediate it there as well. Those intelligence signals are shared across the Defender stack. And now Defender for Endpoints is going to take that signal and say, where has this file resided on any of our workstations? Did someone download that file and keep it locally? Now with Defender for Endpoints, it's going to remediate those that infection, all from a signal that generated from an email originally. Alternatively, so we'll switch things around a little bit. Let's say a user finds a USB key in the parking lot. They get curious, they put it in their machine, and bam, they've been hit with some sort of malware. Defender for Endpoints is protecting them from this. It's going to go ahead and first off, it's detecting the threat. It's going to temporarily disable that user access. So your data is now protected. They can't get access to your content. They can't get access to other resources until that threat is taken care of. It'll kick off that automatic remediation, get that user back in good health, good standing, re-enable their access, but it's also going to go look at the endpoints across your entire environment and make sure that all of those receive that same remediation if that threat existed elsewhere in your environment. On the other side, it'll share those intelligence signals. So you have a payload that came from USB key that has been shared to your email infrastructure, and now that is protecting future attachments from coming in with that same payload, as well as looking at other cloud storage locations where that payload may already exist and making sure that that is remediated and protected. So as we go to protecting your SaaS apps, here's a good look on how you can use our session control. So let's say you have a legacy web app, it's an HR web app, something sensitive, and you're trying to access this from an unmanaged device. Well, Azure AD conditional access would say, all right, we see where you're coming in from. It's unmanaged. We're going to give you an experience where we're proxying that session, but you can still get to it from your unmanaged device, but we're going to monitor and prevent you from taking certain actions while you're in the session. That might be preventing you from downloading content. Alternatively, you can have a different experience. Oh, did not populate. Let's go back. There we go. The other experience. Now you're coming from a managed computer. Azure AD uses that condition from a managed computer, and now you can give them full access to that data, allow copying, allow download of content because they're in a secure location. But that conditional access decision tree in the middle is what can help you with those type of scenarios. So where do you begin? This is a lot of information. How do you get started going down this path? Attackers are like water. They like to establish a path, maintain persistence. They like to find the easiest openings, the most bang for their buck is what can that attacker get? Where can they get the highest return on investment? So our defense strategy is multi-layered. Starts with strong authentication, managing and protecting our identities. You want to also protect your identity and other threats in your environment. That's the defender type stack, protecting your workstations, your identities, and your data. And then there's information protection, further protecting your data with encryption, restricted access, labels, classification, protecting that data. So if it is accessed, that attackers can't compromise that because it's encrypted and protected at its core. Really, the goal is to protect your data with the least cost to you and make it the hardest for the attackers so that their ROI doesn't make sense. Let's talk about a few quick wins here. Number one, understand how you stack up with your security posture in Microsoft 365. Microsoft Secure Score, if you're not familiar with it, it's a great tool for an assessment on your environment. You get this kind of real quick snapshot, you get your secure score, kind of where you may need to increase your security posture, but it also gives you actionable details on things you can deploy in your environment today to increase those scores. You can do exceptions, you can review, you can tailor this to fit your environment. You can go into any of these recommendations, get more details. You can bypass them if that makes sense in your environment, or you can weight them differently, kind of for what makes sense to you and your school. You can also look at the trends and compare yourself to other organizations out there. How do you stand with your secure score compared to others out there, and where do you need to improve? You can also get great metrics, great reports, help provide that to your leadership to get buy-in to implement these updated controls, and show your progress over time. Show them what you've been doing, because a lot of the SOC analyst job or security analyst jobs are thankless, and this gets visibility on how changes are helping in your environment to make everyone more secure. Second quick tip is our strong authentication with zero trust. Again, conditional access and MFA, that's all included with the A3 licenses. So it's things I believe everyone here today should have access to. You can take those signals from devices and different users, external versus internal, create different requirements on restricted access, whether you want to call MFA. MFA is huge. When you can deploy it, it helps prevent so many attack vectors. We talk about the attackers, it's like open water. Well, MFA plugs a giant hole there. It's not without its struggles. Education is hard to deploy MFA. You don't necessarily have all your students running around with smartphones. You don't want to give them YubiKeys or FIDO tokens because they're going to lose them. They're kids. It has its own challenges, but you can still implement security controls and help protect your users and your identities by doing some common policies, whether it's blocking legacy auth or blocking certain countries, using MFA. Don't let the excuse of students or union regulations or other regulations prevent you from deploying MFA for those that you can. MFA for your admins, do it for your staff and faculty and those that have the high business impact if their identities were compromised. Ransomware protection, having a modern strategy for managing your data. OneDrive is a great tool. We have known folder redirect you can deploy in your environment so that your workstations, it'll redirect the docs, the pictures, the videos folders, your desktop folder to OneDrive. So your data is not only residing on your device, but it's in OneDrive. It's now discoverable. You can find out where you have sensitive content. It's protected. If that device was hit with ransomware, you can roll it back. OneDrive's versioned. And you can go back to a point in time on your OneDrive before the ransomware occurred to get you back in good standing. And it's quick and it's easy. Another component to think of for ransomware protection is for those business critical systems, non-workstations, you do have Azure backups. Again, you get that offsite cost-effective option for however critical that data is. It's geo-redundant capability to help protect other systems outside of workstations. Next, quick tip, data classification protection. Start somewhere. You have the ability to deploy sensitive information types. You have the ability to deploy a lot of data loss prevention and information protection capabilities in your environment. Get users used to these labels, what they do, educate them on how to use them. As you get more advanced with our advanced capabilities, you can start forcibly automating where those labels are applied. But the point is, you have a lot of functionality today that you can deploy to protect your content, implement encryption, implement protected files across your environment. And there's a lot of policies right out of the box. We'll kind of show off here in a demo. Lateral movement detection. This is an A5 component, so just calling that out. It's Microsoft Defender for Identity. If you have A5, it's one of the easiest things to deploy. It's an agent. You deploy it on your domain controllers, and it starts integrating all those sensors, all that information to look and detect lateral movement on-prem into the larger Defender stack. So it's a very quick, easy win from an identity posture standpoint. And a little bonus here too, we have our password protection. So you do have access to the banned password list. You can go in, create your own custom list for common passwords that may be used in your environment, different spray attacks, and help block those so that people aren't using password with a 0 and a couple $signs and other commonly used passwords that might be relevant to you, maybe the school mascot, something along those lines. So quick, easy capability you can leverage there. Sorry, my slides seem to be stuck. Bear with me. It looks like my slide was just stuck. So let's see if that loads. Okay, with that, let's actually go do a little bit of a demo. Let's crawl some of the admin panes. Let's see what the end user experience looks like. And I'm going to target a handful of these things from conditional access to information protection, and a little bit of session controls too, depending on time. But actually, maybe I'll pause. Melanie, James, are there any questions we want to address before we dive into a demo?
No questions so far, but everything's looking great. Thanks so much for checking in.
Perfect. Thank you. So let me just switch what I'm sharing over to a virtual machine I have. And let's grab this guy. Sorry. Bear with me. It looks like things are just kind of updating on the presentation real quick. All right. Are we seeing?
We did have one question come in. If you want to answer that, it says, if you buy A5 for faculty, will students get any of the benefits?
Yeah, A5 for faculty, there is a student use benefit. They get a lot of the benefits. The Defender for Office, they get Defender for Identity, Cloud App Security. We can definitely have a deeper conversation on that. The one call out that they don't get is they don't get Defender for Endpoints. But yes, there is a student use benefit for A5. It's a 40-to-1 ratio if you're licensing your full-time faculty and staff. For A5, you get that student use benefit with it, and there's a ton of benefits for those students at no cost. So, okay, thank you for bearing with me, and great question. I assume you can see the admin center here. Is that correct, Melanie?
Yes, I can see it. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. So hopefully this is a familiar page for many of you. I'm going to start off. This is the Microsoft 365 Admin Center, but I'm going to start us off today in the Azure Active Directory Admin Center. So we're just going to go look at Azure Active Directory here, and wanted to talk about a couple components. I don't know if anyone's still running on ADFS servers, or if everyone's moved to password hash sync. But if you're still managing federated identity and ADFS servers and on-prem technology, the recommendation and the way forward is really using password hash sync. And so a couple items to help you make that journey if you haven't already is we're under Azure AD Connect. Within this, you can see your AAD Connect settings, but there's something called staged rollout. So if you're hesitant from moving from ADFS to password hash sync, staged rollout gives you an exception process to bypass for a subset of users. So you can go grab a group of users, say, hey, we want you to have the password hash sync experience with single sign-on, but we're not ready to cut over the entire domain. So it's a great tool. Encourage you to leverage it if you haven't made that journey yet, because it takes the fear out of it. It used to be a couple years ago a big domain cutover. It's no longer that anymore. As you do that too, you might have a lot of apps that are reliant on ADFS. Another hidden trick is being able to discover those apps and your reliance on those apps and being able to migrate them to Azure AD natively. It's hidden under this health and analytics component. So you click this URL here, and there's a Azure AD Connect health agent for ADFS. There's a URL right here. It's an agent you can deploy on your ADFS servers that will then pull in the apps connected to ADFS. It'll help you with the migration. It'll tell you prerequisites. It'll show you who's using those applications and who might be impacted if you do that, that cutover. And all that detail can be found when you go to the ADFS services after you've deployed those agents on your ADFS servers. So with that, let's just jump back to Azure AD. Wanted to show a couple tips for user registration. We talked about multi-factor authentication. We've also talked about self-service password reset. You can unify that registration experience so that your users only have to do it once. To do that, it's under your user settings here. We can go down to user features here at the bottom. It says manage user feature settings. And there's an option for users can use the combined security information registration experience. That prevents your users from having to register their MF or their authenticator app twice, or put in their security questions twice for self-service password reset and MFA. It's unified together. That way they're pre-configured for both at the same time. Self-service password reset. Awesome feature. As you're using password hash sync, you're probably asking, how do I keep our passwords together in sync? Self-service password reset is available to you. You can do it by selected groups of users or do it for everyone. When a user does a password reset, you can provide the authentication mechanisms you want them to use, how many, one or two, whether it's a mobile app, email, phone, security questions. You can select the security questions and how many they need. You can allow them to unlock accounts or not unlock accounts, but it will reset that password both on premises and in Azure Active Directory so that that password is consistent among those environments. So self-service password reset available with A3 licenses. Hopefully everyone here has that great feature across the board. But let's talk about security a little bit more. I'm going to go to our security section here. Let's look at conditional access. And I'm going to start off talking about named locations. This is where you can create effectively a group of IPs. Maybe it's known locations. It's your network, your on-premises infrastructure. You can have those trusted IPs. You can also create lists of blocked countries. Organizations that don't have any business, or not organizations, countries that have no business connecting to your environment. It's low-hanging fruit. It's not the end-all be-all solution. Geographical locations are easily subverted with VPNs. IPv6 brings its own challenges, but it's still low-hanging fruit. Block those countries that you don't want accessing your content. And you can use these in your conditional access policies. So as we go into conditional access policies, here we can see the ones that we've created previously. These are mine from my demo. You'll have different ones in your environment. But as we go to this new policy option here at the top, you'll see a new feature here. It's in preview, but it's really cool. And I encourage you to explore it, is the create new policy from a template. We have pre-canned templates for common scenarios that you might want to use in your environment. So you start off, it says, are we looking to target identities or devices with this policy? We're just going to select identities for this example. Go ahead and click next. And here's a number of pre-canned templates that are commonly deployed in organizations, whether it's requiring MFA for admins, or you're trying to trigger that security info registration for an authenticator app, or your security questions registration, or maybe you're wanting to block legacy authentication. The templates are right here, easy for you to access and create these policies. As you select anyone, we'll do the block legacy auth one for this example. We can hop down. It gives you a default name. You can update that and change it. Be aware it does go to report only by default. It's a great tool. It gives you the ability to see what the policy would have done had it been enabled. You can go get that comfort before you actually turn it on. I encourage you to use report only before actually implementing any policy. You also do have the off option. If you just want to create the policy, then maybe go modify it a little bit more before you put it in production. But we got those options selected. We'll go next. And here you can see a summary of what's going to be turned on. These templates, they're really targeting all users or all devices, and it's creating an automatic exclusion for the user you're logged in with. That's why I like to do it more cautiously, either off or report only. And you can go create this policy. We see it here at the bottom of my policy list. And now I can go in and get more granular, but it gives you that foundation and you can tweak it as needed. I can go maybe make it specific users versus all users. I can go in, add different exclusions for different admins or break glass accounts that you may have. So that is conditional access within Azure AD.
We did have a question kind of come in right now from Aaron.
Perfect.
It's regarding a setup for password reset. And what he's wondering is, will the selected button that you can add more than one group be an option? You might have just answered that, but
it is one group. I'm not aware of anything on the roadmap to increase it to more than one group, but I've heard that comment before. The product groups have heard that as well, but I don't have any kind of dates or roadmaps on if or when that may or may not be available. But right now it's one group that you select, and the users would need to be a member of that group. You can always dynamically have that group if there's an attribute you can key in on for who should be going through password reset. Good question. So let's jump back to our Microsoft 365 Admin Center and our compliance portal. Wanted to talk a little bit about data classification, how you can get started with your data protection journey, even using the stuff you have today. So sensitive information types. This is predefined with over 100 sensitive information types, from credit card numbers, social security numbers, medical identifiers and terms, bank account numbers from all sorts of different countries. But you can go in and you can create your own sensitive information types, whether it's using regex pattern matching or other keyword libraries. I've seen schools use this for kind of a quick and easy offensive words list. They'll use those dictionaries and sensitive info types to help prevent profanity and other commonly used terms. As you get to the advanced features, you can expand upon this. So in A5, you have exact data match. This is incredibly powerful with things. It's popular with our medical centers and higher education for medical record numbers and tying into their electronic medical databases to match specific exact medical record numbers. You could also use this in a similar fashion to match specific student IDs that exist in your environment. And perform classification and protection encryption based on that EDM technology. Another advanced feature, just to highlight real quick, is trainable classifiers. This is using machine learning to train different classifiers. It's powerful. We've got our offensive words list, or our profanity, inappropriate content. You can create your own classifiers and seed it with data and content and further train that, but we've got a number built in. Here's the offensive language, profanity, threat, harassing language in different languages, whether it's English or German, Japanese, etc. You can train these and use them in your environment to help protect your content and data. So that's really powerful for more of a dynamic capability in your threat protection. As you use these classifiers, whether it's trainable, sensitive info types, or EDM, you're going to go start creating your data loss prevention policies and your information protection policies. So we'll start with DLP here. I'm going to go grab a policy, and you can go ahead and create a new policy. It gives you pre-canned templates you can use. So as we're looking, maybe we'll go custom just do PII or privacy. We'll just grab PII and we'll go US personally identifiable information. So it's got pre-canned templates you can use. You can fully customize this. I'll just give it a quick name for the demo with description. And here you can select the locations you want to apply your data loss prevention policies. With A3, these top three, you can all do with your A3 licenses. Protect your email, your SharePoint and OneDrive repositories. You can deploy this today. A5 is introducing everything below here. So it's the Teams chat and channel messages. It's endpoint data loss prevention on your devices. It's integrating your data loss prevention capabilities with third-party SaaS apps. So that's using Defender for Cloud Apps. So if you wanted to use your DLP and AIP policies on a Google Drive, for example, you can do that with this integration, as well as on-prem and Power BI. So we can go select the repositories we want to choose here. You go identify the policy. You can either get advanced or just use it as it is from the template. Usually you're in the advanced, you're probably getting a little bit more granular here. You can turn on and off the features and the behavior, whether you want to take block actions or encrypt actions on that content. You can test it out and use your policy tips before deploying it to your end users. But that's a quick way to create your data loss prevention policy. Information protection. Similarly, we've got our labels you can create, whether it's general labels, might be confidential data that isn't necessarily sensitive PII, PHI, but it might be project related that's confidential that you want encrypted and restricted access. You can create labels for student data or medical data. Really, the sky's the limit. All this is customizable for what makes sense in your environment to your users. And you can deploy those labels using policies. So you can have different labels for different groups of users. You might have different labels for your HR or finance department, or different labels for your students or faculty, and those can be deployed in a policy fashion. So what does all this look like? Let's go grab a Word document here. Unified experience. So whether you're on Word for PC or Mac, or you're in the web, or you're on an iOS or Android device, we have our sensitivity label component here in our ribbon. And so we can expand that. I've deployed 4 labels. These are things I deployed, I created. You can create your own for what makes sense in your environment. But I've got a general label that we can kind of put on content. It does not do encryption, but we might have content that belongs to my school that we're just wanting to label. We can then revoke or control that file, that data later on if maybe there was a compromise. It just gives you control and protection on that content. Now, I'll close that real quick. Let's go next step up. Let's say we've got a file with important project data. Again, something confidential, but not necessarily at risk of losing PII or PHI. Now we've identified, okay, this is a sensitive file. I want to restrict who has access to this data, this project. I'm going to go select our confidential label. This label I have configured to include encryption and restriction on who has access to it. So we're going to go restrict permissions to this document. I'm going to add in my colleague, Megan, and she's going to get read access, but not have write access. I'm going to go to more options, and let's make sure that this expires in 2 days. So we'll make it for February 25th. We can go ahead, hit OK, and now we've applied a label that is encrypting this file and restricting access. I can update this as I need, but it's a protected file. I've chosen to implement some watermarks. You can do that if you want. You can see the confidential label. And so now this stays with the file no matter where it goes. Both of these examples, you can do all of this with your A3 licenses, the manual application of labels. You can even give hints of, hey, we detected certain sensitive data. Maybe it's a social security number. You probably should encrypt this. Use the sensitive data label or whatever you call it. You can give those policy tips today with AIP in your A3 licenses. Now, my next example is our advanced components. This is Azure Information Protection with automatic classification. So we're going to go look at some student ID numbers. I'm just going to put a couple dummy numbers in here. And so we've got a user they don't want to apply a label, but they're going to try to get around the system. I couldn't even get to the save button fast enough. We've already detected that there's sensitive data here, and we've encrypted it and applied a label forcibly based on that detail. And it did it quick. So that's that automatic application. That is one of the advanced features with AIP Plan 2 in A5. Kind of going beyond that, let's look at endpoint data loss prevention a little bit and the capabilities there. Again, this is an advanced feature, just want to be fully transparent there. But you might have a scenario where users have a USB drive. So let's go, my PC. I've got a D drive here. It's a USB stick. And I'm going to go to my demo files. Let me delete what was there previously. So we've got a USB stick on the left. On the right, I've got a bunch of sensitive information. Just for an example, let's grab a PDF with a bunch of student ID numbers. So here's all these student ID numbers in a unprotected file. So I'm going to go grab this content and let's drag and drop over to my USB key. We get a nice little warning, says, hey, these files are being prevented from copying to a USB drive because we have a policy preventing that. Now, you don't want to be too heavy-handed. You want to allow your users the freedom and flexibility to use the tools that they want to use for appropriate content. So if they have sensitive content, maybe it's a just normal Word document, nothing with PII, PHI. They want to copy to that USB key, we can allow them. So we've got our non-sensitive content here. We're allowing them to copy that unrestricted to that location. Alternatively, you can also use this to sanction and unsanctioned apps. So we can say, all right, well, we've got medical record numbers. This is an unrealistic example, but let's say Notepad is a sanctioned app. You want to allow Notepad to manage this content, but we've unsanctioned and blocked Notepad++. You might not want to allow Notepad++ to manage sensitive content. So as we go try to open a sensitive file in Notepad++, we're getting that DLP warning saying, hey, this is not allowed, protecting you, but then still allowing you to manage non-sensitive data with those applications as a user might do. This stems into cloud storage also. Common question I get is, we need to block our sensitive data from going to unsanctioned cloud repositories. We want all of our data to either stay within OneDrive or maybe it's Google Drive. But you know what? We don't want to use Box, but we still want to allow our users that maybe have a personal Box to do what they're going to do in their personal repositories. So in this example, we've sanctioned OneDrive. Again, you could sanction other third parties. Doesn't really matter there, but we're going to use OneDrive as our appropriate location for sensitive content. I'm going to go upload a file. We'll upload our sensitive information file here. It's probably already there. I'll have to overwrite it. Yep, replace. We're uploading it. It's sanctioned. It's an allowed location. No surprises here. But we're going to go to box.com. Kara here is our test user. And we're going to log her into her box.com real quick. And so Kara wants to be able to upload her personal content. Maybe it's a personal picture, whatever it is, to box.com uninhibited. So we'll show a file upload. I'm going to upload a non-sensitive Word document here and nothing get in the way. She's able to do what she wants to do because that data is not sensitive. But the second she goes and tries to upload one of these, we'll do the medical record file here, one of these sensitive information documents, she's blocked from taking any action, blocked from uploading that content to a repository that is not designed for this. So you have that capability. Again, that is endpoint data loss prevention capability. I think we're running close on time. I did promise you a session control example. So let's go show you a session control example. I'm going to go switch and use Google Chrome. Grab an
We did just have a question coming from Scott, and he wants to know if this is Defender blocking.
No, so that is endpoint data loss prevention. What I was showing, blocking the upload to Box, that is endpoint DLP.
Okay, great. And we just got another question from Aaron. Do most of these features work while running a hybrid environment?
Could you elaborate on hybrid?
Aaron, if you want to get on the mic and ask your question, or you can post it in the chat, whatever you're comfortable with.
So, I mean, these features are running on your workstations. Endpoint DLP is Windows, and actually we do have Mac Endpoint DLP in preview currently, so it does work cross-platform. I'm not sure if that's what you meant by hybrid.
He said on-prem, AD, and Azure.
These features, it's ultimately reliant on Azure AD, but you can still have a hybrid on-prem AD and Azure AD. There's no discrepancy there. But let's show you our session control example real quick. It'll be 1 minute. So we've got our Google user logging into their Gmail account. Let's say it's a mixed environment, Google and Microsoft. We're going to go ahead and log in. We're using Azure AD as a single sign-on provider for Google. So we can go log in using Azure AD credentials, and we can apply security policies on the Google environment. So let's get our user logged in. I think I typed the password correct. And we're getting logged in here. In this example, we are doing a session control. So here's a quick little disclaimer. You can choose to deploy this or not, but what this is saying is, hey, you're logging in from an unmanaged device effectively, or somewhere we're not trusting as much. We're going to monitor and put some restrictions on you because of that. And we're putting those restrictions against a Google Workspace environment. So the user can click continue. Everything looks normal. They can get access to their email, their Google Drive, all of their normal experiences. But what we've done is we're now being able to monitor what's happening in this session, and we're able to implement different controls. One of those controls is blocking the download of content. So I've chosen to block the ability to download this, download any content from email, but you can still work with it online. So as soon as we go to download that PDF, or not PDF, that PowerPoint, we're greeted with a little download blocked. It's part of an organizational policy. Here's why. And that's how you integrate session control with third-party SaaS apps to give you better control and insight in what's going on in those environments. Last disclaimer is that was A5, that is an advanced feature. But with that, I'm 2 minutes over. Let's open the floor to any other questions I can help answer.
All right. Thank you so much, Sam. That was a great demonstration. If anyone has any questions, you can raise your hand and get on the mic, or if you want, you can post questions in the Q&A. Thank you again for tuning in. I hope you guys learned a lot, and you know, this time is for you. So like I said, if you have any questions, definitely ask away.
I'll just say thank you for joining me today. I appreciate everyone's attendance. Pat had a good question. Is session control available with A3 plus the security license, or only A5? So session control is specifically part of Microsoft Defender for cloud apps. That is included with the A5 security add-on to the A3 licenses. So you can get that either way. And I will say there's never a dumb question when it comes to what a product does or what license does it fall under. It gets confusing. There's a lot of products. There's a lot of licenses. I guess the thing to take away when you look at licensing is there's different packages to make it fit for what you need, so that you're only buying the features and the products that are important to you and what makes sense to you. So as you get into A5 compliance or A5 security, there's smaller little subsets. If you are really into information protection, the information protection and governance SKU might be a benefit, but you might not be ready for Teams voice. It's all kind of customizable there, and there's a lot of options. Yeah, a lot of the URLs, they're shortened URLs in the Ninja series. I can probably just copy and paste them in the chat window if you want a little bit easier access. And that way everyone can go click them. Let's see if that'll work. There's a whole bunch of content.
Looks like a question just came in from Pat. Interested to know the difference between Defender Endpoint Protection, Plan 1 and Plan 2.
Great question. So Defender for Endpoint Plan 1, it's giving you, first off, cross-platform. It comes with your A3 licenses. It works on Windows, Mac. It works on iOS and Android. It's doing your attack surface reduction. So that's your proactive hardening of the OS. It's also doing your traditional antivirus, anti-malware capabilities. So that's your, we call it next generation protection. It's all cloud powered, cloud driven, AI, machine learning capabilities, but it's doing the core endpoint protection components. It's also giving you access to the central, the Defender Security Center management portal. So you're managing those devices in one pane of glass. P2, Defender for Endpoints, P2 expands upon that. That's what you would think of as your endpoint detection and response EDR or XDR capability, and also gives you automatic remediation and investigation capabilities so that you don't have to have your SOC analyst go manually take care of every incident. It's also giving you really good insight on your threat and vulnerability management, the apps your users are using on those machines, vulnerabilities that might be associated to those apps, and patches where those apps and workstations may need to be patched to correlate that to known threats in the environment. So the latter part, that was part of P2, Defender for Endpoints P2.
Excellent. There's another question on how do you set the SSO up on the Google side? Does it require a third-party IDP connector on the Google side?
So we have great documentation. We probably can't go into the full thing. Azure AD, Google SSO. I'll see if I can pull it up real quick. The documentation goes into the Google side too. There we go. That's not what I was looking for. Seamless single sign-on. I was hoping to find it quick. Google. There we go. I can always follow up with a link to G Suite. There we go. Okay. Tutorial. There is how to do it. Basically, it's like any other single sign-on provider. So it's SAML-auth. I can show you how I did it. We've got our Azure AD enterprise apps. You can go deploy new application. It's going to be in the gallery here, Google Cloud. I'm just going to hop back because I already have it here. So G Suite, you've added the app. You go to single sign-on. And it walks you through the entire process right here. You can go to the configuration. That would have been the quicker shortcut. I should have just done that. You can go to the configuration guide right here that is tailored to G Suite. Shows you both the Microsoft side and the Google side. Effectively, you're going to have your certificate and your login and logout URLs. You'll copy these, head over to your Google Admin Center, tell Google that Azure AD is the identity provider, and make that connection. But it's just traditional SAML. You can test it out, and then you're deployed. Let's see, did I miss any? Actually, last thing, you know what I didn't get to talk about, but since we're all here, is Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps. It's little known. You get Defender for Cloud Apps sort of ring fenced in the Microsoft world with your A3 licenses. Now, Defender for Cloud Apps, full-fledged, being able to integrate third parties, that's all the advanced stuff in A5. There's a lot of really powerful tools you can still use in A3 in Defender for Cloud Apps. One of my favorites is to go to Investigate, and you can go to the OAuth app section. This gives you visibility on what apps your users have granted access and granted permissions to in your environment. So as we have, like, let me go grab, I've got a Home Assistant app here that is tied in with Azure AD. I can go look at this app. I can see the permissions that that app has requested. In this case, it's very minimal. Sign in and read the user profile. And we can see it's a low risk. Now, there might be higher risk apps. You can go identify the higher risk app and the permissions that it requires. You can just dive in and see, here's an app, it's labeled high risk. What is it looking for? And you can go detail all of the permissions that that app is requesting. And this is a great way to see what users have granted permissions to certain apps in your environment and where you might be at risk with that. And you can sanction or unsanction what you want to be used. So great feature you can use today with your A3 licenses to get a really good insight on that. A5 certainly broadens the scope much larger, ties in third parties. You can go do information protection inside Google or Dropbox. You can do those session controls we showed earlier, et cetera. Oh, good. Glad to hear we've got another ADFS to password hash sync convert. I think you'll find your world will be much easier to manage. No more ADFS servers, no more web application proxies. You can close the firewall ports. It's nice to be able to deprecate that infrastructure.
All right, we're just about at time. Once again, I just want to thank you so much, Sam, for the session. It was excellent and excited that everyone tuned in today. Next week, I believe we have our Intune training, and looking forward to seeing everyone in attendance.
Thank you all for joining. I appreciate it. Have a good day.